Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 13. All right, let's summarize today's line. Scotch Gambit, and this time we're covering knight f6 again. This is the most common response to the Scotch Gambit, 27% of the time, but at 2500 and above on leadchess.org, it happens almost 2/3 of the time, 64%. So we definitely want to give it lots of coverage. So they go knight f6, and as before, we push e5, and then we covered d5 once, knight g4 once, and knight e4 once, the three common responses here. We're going to go back to the most common one, d5, that happens 48% of the time, and give it another line of coverage. So they go d5. We go bishop b5, and here's our first junction point. There is a branch here. They could go knight e4 or knight d7. Those are the two common moves. And this time, we're going to do knight d7. It only happens 11% of the time, but 10% or greater is common, according to my definition. And knight e4 at 83%, we'll be able to raise that coverage all the way up to 94% coverage for this position, which will be good for our knowledge of this opening. So they go knight d7. It is a top engine move, so we need to be prepared. We don't know if our opponent is getting lucky or if they're a good player at this point. So they put pressure on e5. They cannot take, of course, because the other knight is pinned, and we castle. At this point, they have one good move, and it's bishop to e7. If they do bishop to e7, maybe they're a top player, maybe they're being lucky, but flip a coin, because if they play anything else, you can see that the ratings on these other lines are lower. Bishop e7, the average rating is 2155. This is what the top level players are playing in this position, bishop e7. All right. At this point, we're going to capture. We could push c3. That's the other option. I explored both of those very carefully, and this line is full of branches that we could choose that are all good, and I had to be very, very careful in exploring them to decide amongst my four criteria that I care about which line is going to meet those criteria with the highest score. And in this case, I chose the bishop takes purely because we have less lines to learn, and otherwise they're equal in every other way that I could detect using my stockfish mapper on the side. So I take, they take, and then we take in the middle at d4. We get our gambit pawn back. The Scotch Gambit is rarely a gambit. We get our pawn back, and now we're threatening to win their queen by taking at c6, which our opponent almost never allows. If they push c5, grab their queen by going knight c6, but the majority of the time they play something else. Knight b8 is the top engine move here. Again, flip a coin. If they play knight b8, you now have two coin flips, indicating to you that you're probably playing a higher rated player. The average rating of knight b8 is 2362. The rest of these are 2000 and 2000. So that is the top engine move. They are showing that they know what they're doing by going knight b8. I think at this point we can be pretty confident that we're facing a good player. They are undeveloping their knight to defend c6. And when they do that, that is a signal for our memory to spring our knight forward. We're going to choose the knight to c3 variation here. Again, I made a number of choices at points where it's really hard to tell because our opponent is not messing up. They're playing really well, and we're learning a top line today. And I am being very careful on choosing the lines to reduce how much we have to learn and get them out of book, trying to play obscure things. But when it comes to engine strength and trickiness, all of these lines are pretty much equal, and so it's a really tough call. So I'm doing a judgment call here. They go back, I'm coming forward. They castle, and that's a signal to bring our queen to f3. There was another potential move there. I think it was queen h5. We're going to do queen f3. I liked that one better. All right, at this point, they've been playing well. We've been playing well. The game is very close to equal. They play a5. That is their top engine move in this position, and now you definitely know your opponent knows what they're doing. If you hover over a5, the average rating here is 2462 playing a5. They've learned their openings. We're facing somebody that is not getting out of book by move 11. Down tricky lines. All right, so rook e1 is how we're going to respond to that. And if you hover over that, we finally clear 2500. The 2500 players, 2509, and bishop f4 is equally strong. You hover over that and you got 2458. These are the top moves here. I chose rook e1. We're going to play that one. So we go rook e1, and now the first inaccuracy on move 12, rook to a6. But maybe it's intentional. I mean, I made some intentional choices to do lower rated moves by playing the Scotch Gambit. All right, so to get them out of book. They go rook a6. Maybe they're trying to get us out of book, but that is slightly weaker than the top move, which is a4 in this position. And that one happens, a4, 38% of the time, but we're not going to cover that today. We're going to cover rook a6, which happens 50% of the time. Because it's more common, we're covering that one first. So they go rook a6. All right, we're going to move our knight to f5. Then, let's see here. Yeah, that's our most common move, but it's also one of our best, so we can't do anything obscure here. We're going to go knight f5. And then 85% of the time they trade off here. That is the only common move. They'll take that knight most likely. They take, we take. All right, at this point, another inaccuracy. They go c5. Is the most common move. So even these high-rated players, by move 12 and 14, are still choosing suboptimal moves here. C5 is not the best engine move, but these ratings are still pretty high. C5, we're going to respond by bringing our queen back to help against this mobile pawn center, back to d3. Whenever you're mobilizing pawns, you have to be very careful about leaving holes and letting your opponent gum it up. We're down to only 7 games at this point, and take a look at these ratings: 3,039, 2948, 2756. Dang. All right, so we got some real high-level rated players in here playing this line. And d4 is what happened 6 times. The average rating there was 2587, and then this one here is only 22. c6, not as good of a move. Yeah, and we can see that on the side when we go through it. So anyway, they push their pawn, it drives our knight to e4, and then we're just going to follow this all the way to the end, even though there's not a lot of data, so that we can learn this line to a point where we have no more data. And now we're looking at really good scores here, really good ratings here. So at this point, queen d5 is the most common. 3 out of 5 played queen d5 here. So we're gonna glance at that one. Now we're down to 3 games, and at this point, bishop g5 is the top engine move, not the f4 that was played twice. So we go bishop g5, and then we're down to just 1 game, a 2756 player against a 2660 player. Black ended up winning this game, but we're going to play it optimally until we branch off of them. So they take, we take, and then that game went rook g6, which is the top move in this position. And threatening that if we move our knight somewhere that doesn't stop it, they'll take at g2. So at this point, c4 is the move that was played, and we're not going to play that. We're going to play f4. They are both very good and often transpose. I'm choosing f4 simply because less branching, and in fact it'll often transpose, and this reduces how many equal branches that we have to learn, that we allow we want to restrict our opponent's options. So we're going to end on f4, and then at the end I will show you some continuations off of that, but that's the end of our line for today. We're on line 19, move 19. All right, let's get into the details here. So, Scotch Gambit, knight f6. All right, we push, they go d5, we go bishop b5. We don't need to talk about this anymore. We've already covered it. They go knight to d7. All right, here's where we start. Let's get my chess mapper over here. For those of you, this is your first video. This is my mapping program. This is my advantage. This is the core of my channel. I wrote this program that uses Stockfish 18 to put the scores up, pre-calculated to a depth of 200 million nodes per position, and as you step forward, it recalculates and recalculates and recalculates, so we can keep seeing how it fluctuates, and we can explore chess and find good lines. We're not using Stockfish to find a good score, to do a good analysis of a position. We are using it at another level. I've got a database that has about 250,000 positions in it since Stockfish 18 was released, and it is mapping out lines. We are digging through lines, looking for the top 4 qualities that we care about: engine strength, nastiness, or trickiness, minimizing branching, and obscurity until they're out of book. The #1 dominant factor that I have been observing in all the games I've looked at is not the initial engine strength of your opening, but how much bigger your opening book is than their book. And so the objective in the opening is to come out with an advantage, and as big of one as you can get. And therefore, the emphasis is on making our book bigger than theirs. How do we do that? We take them down obscure lines, so that's why obscurity comes into play. But we also need top engine moves, nastiness we care about, and minimizing branching. So there's the summary of my criteria that I try to do quickly in each video. Let's get into this line. So they go knight f6, we go e5, and now they go d5. This is very common top level play here. of the early moves. We go bishop b5, that's our only good move here. And then knight e4 is what everyone usually plays. And you can see its score here. And positive is, it means white's ahead, negative means black's ahead, and this is around 0. It fluctuates a little bit as we go deeper because we're re-examining it. Knight d7, it's equal. It's equal here, it's equal here. That two depths saying the same score gives us good confidence that it's accurate. Because I'm not going to a billion nodes like I'd like, I'm only going to a depth of 200 million positions off the current position in Stockfish. It's not as much as it sounds. I need better computers. Anyway, we castle. And I'm not implying anything by that. It's my autism. Anyway. I operate with explicit language, not implicit language. I don't put things, I don't imply things. And that causes trouble with social interactions. Anyway, but little detail there. All right, so let's see, where were we? Knight d7, yes. They step out to d7 and we castle. All right, so we can see that castling is our top engine move here. I explored the others just to make sure. That gives them more options that we don't like. So I only needed to look at c3 and see that castling is clearly better. Look at all these scores here versus c3, these scores here. Yeah, castling's definitely at this point. So we castle. And now, bishop e7. Take a look at, it's pretty much equality. If they do it, and if they don't, we're 50 points ahead or more. Excuse me, still got that cold from yesterday. So, bishop e7 is their only good response here, like I was explaining. Here it is on the mapper. All right, at this point you can see c3, and that is another viable line, and I had to explore it pretty far in order to determine that I like bishop takes c6 best, just for the less branching. So as soon as we take, they have to take back, obviously, so, or they lose, so that's, there we go. And then we take at d4, and that's our only good move at that point. And that brings us to this junction point here, where they have 3 options that we have to learn. All right, take a look at knight b8, undeveloping your knight. It's the top move. The score is pretty much equal. If they take your pawn, that's the second best move. 20% of the time they do that. That brings our score up to 19, or as I go deeper, 18, 20. All right, yeah, it's about 20. Let's see, knight takes, and then bishop b7. That one's fun. We'll cover it later. Bishop b7, look at our score there. If they choose that one, which is an intuitive move, right? Develop a piece, protect against the attack. The problem is that in this specific position, it does not cover these light squares, and it allows knight to f5, which we'll cover in another video. That's how we'll launch our attack if they do bishop to b7. But they're not going to do that. They're going to bring their knight out back to b8, protecting c6, and keeping their bishop on that light square diagonal, keeping our knight out of their business. So knight b8 is the top engine move here, and when people are playing this, you can start suspecting you are playing somebody who knows what they're doing with their opening. Knight c3 is our top move. I looked down some of these others and didn't need to look down that one, and you can see how far I had to look in this particular one to see enough data to see that knight c3 is our best move. White's moves are on the left, black's moves are on the right, and I'm clicking back and forth. Knight c3, that leaves a branching of 2. Once we go knight c3, there's 2 common moves, castling and c5. Today we're covering castling. Here's c5. That puts us 32 points ahead. Castling's their only good move here. a5 is okay-ish. 15, castling's the better move. They still have equality. So they are keeping up with us. The goal is, we're playing the Scotch Gambit. That is already rare. They know it to move 12 before they start fumbling. We're going to learn it deeper. The goal in the opening is to come out with an advantage, and if you choose a weaker opening, it has a benefit. It's more obscure. So if you make it your main line and it's not theirs, you have more likelihood of having deeper coverage, especially if you put in the work, and you can take them deeper to where you gain more than that initial 20-point advantage that you could have if you play a more common opening like the Ruy Lopez or the Italian game. So anyway, so they castle. We go queen f3. Queen h5 here is also good, and I had to look down that one to see the branching, and what the moves would look like. Here's their 3 common responses. One of them's a blunder, so I had to take that into consideration, as well as how frequently it happens, and Queen F3 and its responses, and take a look at it. It looks better, all right? Queen H5 has 2 equal moves that they could play that we have to learn, 1 blunder in there. Queen F3 has 1 equal move that they commonly play with 1 blunder that's a lot more devastating, and 2 others that are poor. There's more branching, but they're bad branching, and then I have to look at the percentages of each of those. So I chose the Queen F3 variation, not Queen H5. I like that one better, so that's why we're coming up to Queen F3. These players are out of my depth. I am not this high rated. Stockfish is though, and I'm just mapping openings. So A5 is their most common response here, 38% of the time. And take a look at A5. If they don't play A5 and they do any of these other 3 common moves, C5, Bishop E6, and Bishop B7, very intuitive moves, look at how well they do according to the engine. They're intuitive, but they're not good. Look at the other moves that the engine is saying is good. They are less intuitive. How do I know that? Well, here's the evidence. 2.3 thousand games, and people are not playing them as much. Okay, F6 is there at 8%. But even it's not there. What do they need to be doing if they want to do some of these other ones? Bishop D7, Queen D7. All right, so A5 is 38% of the time, and is by far the most common engine move, and it is the best move. So when they play A5, it's another signal you're now going down the line that the top players know. But look at these others. I mean, these aren't wimpy players. C5 average rating is 2381. Bishop E6 average rating 2485. Let's look at C5 and Bishop E6 right here. Bishop E6 and C5. C5's a blunder. So look at this. We are only 11 moves in, and players with an average rating of 2381 are blundering here by playing C5 and mobilizing their pawns too early. You have to be very careful mobilizing a pawn majority or just pawns that are unchecked, because if you do it at the wrong time, they can get locked into place to where they switch from being an asset to being a liability. And so the timing of it is actually very tricky. That's one of the difficult things for humans. That's very easy for machines. So yeah, I like this line. I like the Queen F3 over the Queen H5 one. So Queen F3, and then we're going to be covering the most common, which is the best. So we are now going to do a line that's going to get us all the way into the 2500s. Check this out. A5. And then after A5, we're going to be playing Rook E1. Bishop F4 is also a top move here. We're not going to be doing that one for the same reasons as I've been going over. I'm choosing Rook E1 instead. And look at the rating here, 2509. Bishop F4, average rating, 2458. Don't put too much store in those, because Stockfish can blow these guys away any day of the week without even breaking a sweat. So Rook E1 is going to be our move of choice. And again, we are just going back and forth with equality, 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 equality. The goal, though, is to have our book be deeper than theirs down all lines, and that will make them fumble the ball somewhere, and we will then pick it up and be ahead. And hopefully we'll get more than the 20 points that we sacrificed, the 21/100ths of a pawn, by using the Scotch Gambit instead of Ruy Lopez or the Italian game. All right, so at this point, we're going to see already 13 points free for the taking. All right, Rook A6. Rook A6 happens 50% of the time. A4 happens 38% of the time. Rook A6, take a look at it. Here's Rook A6. It says we're 13 points in the lead. A moment ago, if they played A4, we would have been equal. So let's glance at that. Here's A4. Look at all the moves we could do where it's pretty much equal, 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 equal. So A4, we don't have a lot of bite against A4. But against Rook A6, we've got a number of moves that start to put us in the lead. Knight F5, Bishop D2, 15 points ahead, 11 points ahead. So, you know, those players who are saying, oh, I don't want to sacrifice 20 points and play the Scotch Gambit, points are not a lot. They fluctuate dramatically throughout. You need to get your book better than theirs. That's the dominant factor. And obscurity, playing as something obscure helps with that, especially if you can get something obscure and strong. That's the best of both worlds. There's not a lot of that around, though. So they're not playing A4. They're playing Rook A6, their first inaccuracy. Or maybe it was intentional to get us out of book, to go down the line, and maybe they know this much better than us. You never know. Got to be careful with these players until they do something. You can't assume they're out of book until they do something really bad. So Knight F5. Knight F5, we also could have done Bishop D2. That's good. H3, that goes back to equality. knight f5 is our top move, and it doesn't branch as much. So I like knight f5 here. So they go rook a6, we go knight f5. All right, they take 85% of the time. There is no other common move. And if we come look at this, bishop takes f5 is again another inaccuracy. d4, well, actually not necessarily, because if we look a little deeper, the d4 line, oh yeah, excuse me, the d4 line, if they played d4 here, it would have kept our score in check here. So, but the bishop, but taking our knight and then us taking back, now look at their options. See, it keeps our lead. So they could actually recoup some of that if they played d4 here. But who's playing d4? 6%. 85% are doing bishop takes f5, and these aren't pushovers. 2482, 2491, 2515, top-rated players in here. Wow, that one, 2515 is playing bishop e6. Which one's that? Let's see. Bishop e6, bishop e6. Where are you at? Where are you at? Wow, is it really far down? Is it a bad move? I am not seeing it on the first pass. Let's go through it again. Bishop takes, right? There it is. 52 points. Okay, so that's a mistake. And the higher rated players are actually, well, there's only 4 games there. We're down to 140 games. We're getting down to the end of data, and we're only at move 13. That's one of the benefits of playing the Scotch Gambit, is you get that obscurity factor. All right, so 85% of the time they're going to be taking that knight. We're preparing for that. So they take, and then of course we have to take back. Queen takes. So let's take a look at that. Bishop takes, queen has to take, and now we have another branching point. So we're now seeing how big chess really is. It branches at each of these junction points. You know, branches 3, then 5, and we're not branching the true branching of chess. The true branching of chess, there's lots of moves they could be doing. We're just hitting what's common, which is a lot more practical. We need to cover what's practical because chess is too big to do what's actually physically possible. We only cover what's common. But even that makes chess vast. But the players that do that end up getting a much larger advantage right out of the opening, and it helps them win games. Tell me you haven't played games where the opening dictates the flow of the entire game thereafter. Our very first mistake, our opponents pounce on it and they punish us for the rest of the game, and we fight to argue of, you know, whether it'll make us lose the game or not. So the opening matters. And so do all the moves after it. So we're going to try and play flawlessly throughout the game, and that's why we're doing these lines. So they take, we take, and that leads us to this junction point here where there's a branching of 3, and we're going to have to cover the others later. The top engine move is neck and neck with the second top engine move and the third. So A4 is there. It only happens 2% of the time. We're going to ignore that one. Queen d7, queen c8, c5. What's most common? c5. 42% of the time, and it's the worst of the 3. That gives our score, that takes our score up to 31. So those playing c5 have an average rating of 2472, and it is an inaccuracy. They're giving us a little bit more score. And this is how engines just accumulate tiny advantages over time and defeat extremely high-rated human players like they're nothing. Even the best players in the world cannot compete with Stockfish, can't even get close. So it just can't talk, and we have to infer things from it. Queen d3. Queen d3 is definitely our top engine move here. The others aren't even close. So here's queen d3. Queen d3 puts us in a nice, comfortable lead, and they have to play d4 to keep it from getting out of control. So they go c5, we go queen d3, bring the queen back and help against that mobilized pawn mass in the middle. And now we're down to 7 games. And of those games, you had a 22 and 2300 player, and then you had 6 of them that were 2587 average rating. Wow, these are the higher rated on the site. And look at this guy, 3039, 2948. Yeah, we're getting to the higher games here. And that was a bullet game, so he clearly knows his openings. I doubt he's doing all the calculation to get this far in the game playing this well. So yeah, they've got really large opening book in their head. These higher rated players do. So d4. d4 is the dominant move in this position, and anything else gives a ton of score, like c6. That gave the advantage to white very well. They did go on to win though, so that just goes to show it's not over just because they give away the advantage. d4. All right, so our opponent plays d4. We're going to go knight e4. All right, knight e2 also looked good here. We look at knight e2 and look at what's common off of it. We look at knight e4, look at what's common off of it, and then we look at what's strong off of it. And they switch spots. The knight e2 one ends up going down. The knight e4 one ends up going up. And it's a better way to play. Knight e4 is. So we're going to do that one. We jump to e4. And we're going to follow this to the end, even though we have very little data, because we have 2 data points. We have the games, and we only have 5 of those, but we also have the engine scores over here on this side that I've mapped out all the way down to this line that goes really deep. So we have between those 2 data points, and then we also have our own guesswork, another data point. So we know what looks typical for players of our rating, and we can guess, and we can see what might be common. But we can do some educated guesses here to continue to drive this line as deep as we can before we stop, because 19 moves is not too many to memorize. People memorize games all the time, and we need these to be our trunk and our branches of our opening, so that even if people never go down this line with us, it's still useful, because we're going to repeat this line, much of this line, over and over and over through many games, drilling it into our memory. And then they'll branch off here, and they'll branch off there, and those will be smaller branches and twigs and leaves of our tree. And you can do that when you learn this line, and I teach you this line, and then someone branches off of it. Wherever they branch off, if I haven't done a video of that, just go throw it in a chess engine and see if it's obvious what to do. And if there's several moves and it's hard to tell, just pick one for now. And you'll have to fill in the leaves, because I can't do every single branch all the way down 20 moves deep without doing hundreds and hundreds of videos. That's how big chess is and how quickly it grows. So, yes, but we're going to get this main line drilled as deep as we can until we run out of data. So queen d5 is the most common. Rook g6 is the other common move here. Very high level players here, 2700 average rating and 2566. All right, so queen d5, rook g6. Take a look. That's what's common on the left. That's what looks intuitive to humans. Turn and look at the right at our engine strength. a4 is the top engine move here. Okay, score of 28 points ahead for white. Queen d5 is the next most. Okay, 40 points ahead. That was the most common move. Rook g6, not as good. Gives white a 79-point lead. That happened twice. So, and with higher rated players. So it's hard to find these engine moves. Engines are better than us. Queen d5 is going to be our main line. We're gonna do that one. And even though we only have 5 points of data, that's enough to know that even if it's not the most common move, if we had more games in here, it is definitely one of the common moves. So queen d5, and we do need coverage, so we'll do it. Queen e5. All right, at this point, bishop g5 is definitely the dominant move, and that's why that's why knight e4 was good, is the engine was looking at queen d5, bishop g5, as well as the other branches. Excuse me, get some water. All right. But yes, bishop g5, this one's less questionable. It's clearly better than the others. We look at these scores. If we play it, look at the score, look at the responses. And then if we play one of the others, look at those responses. It's night and day. Bishop g5 here is your top engine move. So you go bishop g5, and then we only have one game where that was played. Bishop g5 happened once, f4 happened twice by white. Bishop g5 is clearly the stronger move here, and now we're down to one game where a 27-56 player was playing a 26-60 player. Black ended up winning, but that doesn't mean anything as far as our move at this point in time. At this point in time, bishop g5 is the best move. And then we only have one game of data. However, let's look at the engine. c4 is they could play c4 or bishop takes, and that's it. Everything else is worse. So I think we should prepare for the bishop taking. And then when they take, we're going to take with our knight. And that does look really good to the human eye, because now they get to bring their rook over to g6 here, which is a very natural move, pinning it. And that is... we only have one response to that. I'm sorry. No. We only have one response to that position, taking the bishop back. Rook g6. Okay, right here we have multiple responses. Sorry. We have two, f4 and c4. All right, so we're at the end of our line, and I chose f4. I did a lot of mapping at this point. Clearly, f4 and c4 are the best moves here. Everything else has a score of equality, and white played c4 here, which was a good move, and the game went on. And then black ended up getting an advantage because white slipped up. But here we are on move 18, and both players are playing quite well, but white has the lead at this moment in time. So why f4 instead of c4? Again, branching. These players are playing so well. They are not messing up very often. Very tiny inaccuracies here and there. And it's hard to pick these lines. I'm out of my depth with these players. I am just... Stockfish isn't, though, and so I am literally just mapping. I don't have as much commentary on these moves this time because I'm a strong club player. I can comment on what I see, but they could be seeing other things that I don't understand yet. And so people tell you don't memorize lines because you will be just memorizing stuff you don't understand. And I disagree. I am a high-functioning autistic person, and one of the things that people on the spectrum, one of the traits they often have is they work bottom up, not top down. We have a hard time, generally speaking, starting with the summary and then working downward. Instead, we collect data on the bottom and then work our way up. We start in the fine details, figure out how it all works, each detail works, and then put it together and start understanding it. We have a really hard time. People who are not autistic actually have an easier time inferring things, guessing what other people mean, assuming things. We don't make assumptions as much. So, and I'm speaking in generalities here. It's a spectrum, and you get a wide variety along that spectrum, but this is how I learn chess, and this is how I'm teaching chess. That's why I'm calling autistic chess openings. I learn them by collecting data, analyzing the data, then drawing conclusions, bottom up. Not give me principles, then I try and exercise them, and then I fine-tune my mistakes at that point. That's how the majority of the population learns. You tell them principles like develop toward the center, develop your pieces, focus on the center, and I instead just look at lines of top example play, which we have here, raw data, and then I draw my own conclusions, and I watch that often. They're moving the same, they're not moving the same piece twice in the opening, but sometimes they are. And that invalidates the rule. And so I look for a different rule because I find exceptions. And I'm only discovering that because I'm looking down top levels of play. This is how neural nets are programmed in computers, right? Computer scientists, when they write code, they don't code. Things aren't coded today like they were once a neural net comes into play. And this is what made Stockfish so powerful. You don't have people writing if this, then this, or while this is true, do this, which is how typical coding is done. Instead, you have the code writing the code, and it's using examples. You give it example after example after example of top-level play, and it starts seeing patterns and figuring it out, and it writes its own code based on those patterns. That's what I'm doing here. I'm giving you line after line after line so that you can develop your own pattern recognition software and learn this in the same manner as neural nets learn, by patterns. You can't define them. There's too many variations, but you start to get a feel for it and grasp it intuitively as you get more and more examples. So we're not just memorizing lines. People tell you memorizing is bad, and then they tell you to go memorize Grandmaster games and study them. Well, yeah, if you just memorize the line and never look at it, then they're right. You memorize it, but you memorize what's common, what's going to come into play. You're going to use it over and over. These are your main lines, and then you'll learn. You will learn. You memorize the technique that the Kung Fu master teaches you. You may not understand every little thing that's happening now, but because you memorize the line and because it's common lines and they're going to come up again and again, you're going to get lots of repetition, and you will see little nuances and details over time, especially as you progress in your rating, that show you more and more and more insight as to why that line's so good. And as you do that, you are improving, and you're not just memorizing. So this is how I learn, right? I take an engine apart, I study every piece, I put it back together, then I start to understand how it works. Everyone else just has it explained to them, and then they learn that way, and I don't learn that way, and that's one of the reasons I ended up dropping out in my junior year of computer science. I couldn't I couldn't process and learn the same way the rest of the class was in that particular class because the professor was disorganized and jumped around. I need things to be organized. I can't follow the intuitive leaps he was making that everybody else could follow. I ended up not being able to pass the class 3 times in a row. And whereas I aced at the top of the class, calculus 1, 2, and 3, so I'm not dumb, but I couldn't pass discrete mathematics, which was supposed to be easier. So details, 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 details. That's what this channel's about. It's giving you concrete lines to study so that you can find patterns, so you can see top levels play, so that you can come up with your own conclusions on why, what's good and why, what the principles ought to be. We think for ourselves. We don't just follow the pack. We invent our chess principles. I do the same thing in my writing. I examine what's taught in the writing books, and then I come up with my own conclusions based on what I'm seeing. Study and draw your own conclusions. So that's what we're doing here. We've got the line. We memorize the line to this point in time. We use Stockfish to show us what's good, and then we try and infer and figure out why this is good. So let's finish up the ending of this lesson with this ending point F4. Now C4 and F4 are both really good, and I had to map really far on a lot of variations to figure out. I mean, look at how deep I'm going here. Jeez. To figure out which of the two is better. It's neck and neck. These are both really good. The player who played C4 was playing a good move. And at this snapshot, the engine likes F4 better, but they end up both, as you go deeper on all the lines, they're about the same. However, F4 has less branching. They transpose. Lots of the lines between the two transpose into each other, and you end up with less positions. So for example, you go C4 and you have 3 branches to learn. Queen B7 stays just 2 moves deep. It stays just being 1 line. Queen A8 stays just being 1 line, but Queen D7 branches to 4 that all have fairly decent scores. So now you got 2 moves deep. You have 7 lines you have to learn, whereas the F4 variation here, it only branches 2. That one branches 1, and that one branches 1, and then becomes 3. And so you end up at a depth of 2 plies deep or 3 plies deep. You end up branching to 4 instead of 7, or what was it again? Sorry, someone walked in and I kind of got distracted, my train of thought. The autism, I'm not good at multitasking, and I know I'm referencing autism again. I'm not trying to make excuses. That's just we say what we mean, and we mean what we say. Generally speaking, I just say things how they are. I call it how they are, and that gets me into trouble with the blunt mannerisms, just telling people, and then it's offensive. We care about truth first and feeling second, and everyone else seems to care about being nice first and truth second. And so it gets me into trouble, and then I get into tangents because of the details, like I'm doing now. I'm probably going too long, so I get constant complaints about talking too long and not knowing how to not interrupt people. And now I'm digressing again, so I'll try and get back on topic. Sorry about that. I did say it was autistic chess openings. The autism is creeping a little bit here. All right, so C4. I was in the middle of trying to show you that C4 branches more. So C4 has 3 lines, and the Queen D7 line, we need to respond to F4. It's our only good move, and then there's 4. Okay, 4 plus 3, 7. We got 7 lines, 2 moves deep, and even more, 3 moves deep, whereas the F4 line ends up being 2, and the H6 one branches to 3, and so we end up with a total of that one that was 2 became... Yeah, we end up with about 4 or 5. I'm not able to do the math on the fly right now, the basic arithmetic. And the lines that they overlap on are going to be in common, so the F4 is better. And this is what I do. I don't go forward until I confirm each step of the way it's perfect. I've been a perfectionist my whole life, and I've had to learn how to let go of some of that. But my perfectionism's coming in here. I like the F4 better than the C4. Let's end it with F4 and not C4. And then, when they play knight C6, we're going to hit them with C4. And then, when they play H6, we're going to hit them with C4. So we'll get the C4 in just after the F4. All right, so let's go down these lines a little bit here at the end. We go F4. Let's see. And now, just to prepare you for a little bit after that, once we play F4, yes, right there, F4, 2 good responses, knight C6 and H6. That's it. C4 is there, but it's worse. And you can see if they do play that, play Queen F3 in response. All right, that's your top move. If they go C4, they're threatening to trap your queen. You need to know where to go. Go to F3. All right, so knight c6, we'll cover that first because it branches the least. Knight c6, c4, queen d7, queen e4. That's what that line looks like at the end there. All right, and then the other one, that's knight c6. Here's h6. It branches 3 ways. They go h6, we go c4 again. They might now move their queen to b7, staying on that diagonal, or queen a8, staying on that diagonal, or back off to d7. Those seem to be the best in both the c4 and the f4 line, bringing their queen to b8, bringing their queen to b7, to a8, or going to d7. Those are their top retreating spots when we hit them with c4, and they do that here. So they go queen b7. We're gonna respond to that with knight e4, and then their only good move is to take our pawn down there. And then we got to go g3, and the game continues from there. Let's see, that was the queen b7 one. Here's the queen d7 one. Queen d7, we have one good move here, knight e4. We do knight e4, queen g4, threatening there, and g3 is our top move, and that's what that line looks like past that point in time. All right, let's see, last one, queen a8. Very similar, they're staying on that diagonal. We go knight e4 again. Now they go knight e7 as their knight d7 is their top move, and their only move that doesn't drop enormous points. They need to develop that knight into d7 this time. So when they back their queen up to a8, it looks a little bit different than the b7 one. Knight to d7, and now our top move is rook e2. So you can see how big chess is and how much branching there is over and over and over the deeper you go. We need to minimize that branching to get these lines to learn, to get it deeper than our opponent. Don't fall into the fallacy of, well, it's big and it keeps growing exponentially, so there's no point to memorizing it deeper. I can't control my our teeth are going to get worse our whole life. Should we brush our teeth? Our health is going to, our bodies are going to eventually deteriorate. Should we take care of our bodies? You can't keep everyone out, so don't build a fence. You can't learn all these lines, so don't learn any of them. No, we're going to reduce the branching as much as we can and learn it as deep as possible, get our book as big as possible so that our book dwarfs their book. This is how the top level players are getting advantages over each other. And we're going to do the same here. So we're getting our book as deep as we can on this line, and there's that line. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I wasn't too autistic for you this time. Anyway, until next time, thank you.